All right, welcome back to Hope for the Caregiver. This is Peter Rosenberger. This is the program for you as a family caregiver. Glad to have you with us. Hope for the Caregiver is that conviction that we as caregivers can live a calmer, healthier, and dare I say it, a more joyful life, even while serving as a family caregiver. I want to swerve just a hair into something that's rather practical. All right, don't tell anybody, but we're going to get practical for just a moment. No, this is a funny story. My father-in-law will probably be upset with me if I told this, so y'all don't tell anybody what I'm about to tell you, okay? Let's just keep this kind of quiet amongst us. But years ago when he purchased this place out here in Montana, way back in the 80s, there was nobody anywhere close. The nearest neighbor was well over a mile away. There was no electricity, nothing. He had to have everything done, started from scratch out here, well, septic, the whole thing. He's kind of a pioneer type of guy anyway. And he was stringing some barbed wire. Well, the first trip, several trips, he came out here with a truck, and he eventually brought some machinery and so forth from their home in Florida. But for whatever reason, one summer they drove across country in a Cadillac that he had purchased. It was one of those long ones, the big stretch ones, not a limousine, but pretty long, and he always loved that car. He said it was just a great riding car, and it was. I mean, you'd sit on the road and it was very comfortable. But he brought this out here. Well, we're 10 miles from the paved road, and it's not the dirt road that we're on is not exactly a nice smooth avenue. And that car was certainly out of place up here. But nevertheless, he drove across country in it. And there was a strand of barbed wire or section of barbed wire fence that he needed to put up. And he didn't have a fence stretcher with him at the time. I don't know what happened or whatever. Anyway, but just out of expediency, he decided to hook up some of his barbed wire to the bumper of this Cadillac and stretch it that way. And it worked. I mean, he was able to make it work. And you'd have to know Gracie's dad to understand how fabulous a story this is. But if you can imagine being way out here in the Rockies, 10 miles from a paved road, stringing barbed wire with a Cadillac. And it was a strange sight, and I'm sure there were a lot of ranchers, if they had seen it, would have scratched their heads a little bit, but he pulled it off. Well, why am I telling you this? Well, a lot of times as caregivers, we will do what is necessary and expedient because we can. But it doesn't mean that we should. And it doesn't mean that that's something that is a good idea, certainly for the long haul. And I think a problem that we get into as caregivers is that we will just shoulder it on ourselves, and we are the wrong tool for the job. Now, it doesn't mean we can't get it done. It doesn't mean that fence won't last. I mean, that fence that he strung, still out here, still going strong, 35, 40 years later. And that's great. But it still doesn't mean it was the right tool for the job. And he knows that. I mean, he's got several fence stretchers out here, and we got to go work on some fencing this week. And he knows that, but out of expediency, that's what he did. Now, my question to you is, as a caregiver, how much are you doing out of expediency that's using the wrong tool for the wrong job? Doesn't mean that you can get away with delegating it out right now. Doesn't mean that there's anybody else to help you. Doesn't mean that you have the right tool. But if you're aware of it, can you switch gears and start thinking, okay, this is something I maybe need to step away from? And it may take a bit of planning to do that. It may take a little bit of work. I get that. But I'd like for us as caregivers to get out of the mentality of just putting everything on us and not being the best steward of us. Because that's what it comes down to. That Cadillac, I promise you, when it came off the assembly line, there was probably no one involved in the whole process of building that vehicle. The plush seats, all the power stuff that it had. I mean, it was a beautiful car. And nobody ever dreamed that it would be stretching barbed wire out in Montana somewhere. Doesn't mean it couldn't. Just none of the design team, all the engineers, everybody that was involved in building that vehicle never would say, oh, yeah, that's what, And quite frankly, most automobiles are not designed for that. You can make do with it. And some beat up old truck or something, that's fine. But I still don't even recommend doing it that way. There's a reason they built fence stretchers. Okay? So what about you? Just because you can do something, is that the best stewardship of you? Is this working? I could do a lot of things. I'm pretty good at what I do. I've learned over the years to do quite a few things. But I'm also learning to say no to some things and to delegate it or offload it, whether it's to other human beings that I can enlist as volunteers or pay them if I have the money to do so, or technology. Is it the right tool for the job? How many times have you heard this? There's a video I saw somewhere that went kind of viral that showed this young millennial, and he was out with a fence pounder. Now, do you know what a fence pounder is? That's what I call it. It's a long metal tube, very heavy, with handles on either side. And what you do is you put it over the metal stake of your fence post, and you just pound it down into the ground. And that's how you put them up. It's pretty easy, pretty straightforward. Well, this poor young millennial, or he actually maybe younger than that, he was just 17, 18 years old, maybe, I don't know. And he was hammering a stake with the fence pounder. He was holding it, hammering it down. And bless his heart, he was earnest, and he was sincere about it, but it was not the most effective way of doing business. I felt sorry for him. By the way, thank you for getting that hum out. I don't know what was going on with that, but I felt sorry for the boy. And maybe he learned, maybe some kind soul explained to him that there's a better way to do it than the way he was doing it. But the lesson is not lost, that for many of us, we are doing the best we can with something that is not the best fit for it. And oftentimes we bear the brunt of this as caregivers. I'm a big fan of build a better mousetrap. Can we do this more efficiently? Can we do this better? Or are we just doing workarounds all the time and we're absorbing it? Is there a smarter way to do this? And I would suggest to you that there is. But it's not going to happen easily. And sometimes you have to ask someone, and that means humbling yourself. Am I doing this well? Am I doing this right? Is there a better way? Is there somebody better that can do this? How many of you all are really good at doing your taxes, for example? I mean, are just whizzes when it comes to these sort of things? Show of hands. Anybody? Some of you are. And there's software out there that really helps. But I would suggest that most of us are not. And I determined a long time ago that my life was made easier by getting an accountant, the right person for the job. I could do it. There's a lot of things that I can do. I've learned out here in Montana, one of the things you learn in Montana is you got to learn how to do stuff for yourself because help is a long ways away. And there are things that I've just learned to do. And I'm grateful for it, and I'm better for it. But there's some things that involve so much time, and the learning curve is so steep. And I had to ask myself, is this the best use of me? Is this the best use of me? Now, I may not be able to do anything about it, but I can at least ask the question and unleash the power of my mind to come up with a creative answer. And that's something I'd like for you all to consider. Okay, it's just a practical thing. But look at the everyday task you're doing. is this the best use of you? Okay? Just because you can do it doesn't mean you should do it. It doesn't mean it won't have long-term implications. For a season, all of us could stand on our heads for, a couple of months. We could do all kinds of things, and we'll make do. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. But if this becomes a lifestyle, if you saw my father-in-law, for example, stringing this entire property with a Cadillac, somebody's going to say something. For this little stretch, he was on a flat piece of land. It was right here by the road. It worked out. But this is pretty hilly country up here. A lot of rocks out there. So if he's taking a Cadillac up a dirt road or up no road out in the field doing it, there's going to be some ranchers right here that'll take their hat off and scratch their head a little bit and wonder what's going on with that. And if that young man had tried to string a whole line of fencing by hammering in every one of those posts with that pounder, eventually he's either going to figure it out or somebody's going to say something to him and say, son, there's a better way. What about us as caregivers? Is there a better way? Is there a better method? Is there a better opportunity for you to disassociate from something that you have just done, but it's wearing you down? Is there somebody else in your life that could do it better, that may be willing to help you or teach you a better way? It doesn't necessarily mean you're going to stop doing it. It just means that maybe you're not pounding a fence post in with a pounder and you get a better tool for the job, or learn how to use the tools you have better. Most of us have phones and computers that are far more sophisticated than anything NASA went to the moon with. Are we using them to our advantage? Is there somebody who can give us a tutorial on it? Hey, here's a tip. Here's something that you might not know you can do. The other day I set up lights in our bedroom that are automated that I can turn on with Alexa, and Gracie can turn them on voice command so she doesn't have to twist her back to turn over and grab a light. It's just easier on her back. It's a smart way of doing business. What about you? Don't be afraid to do a little self-examination of what's going on in your life to see if you can't find a better way to do it. A little practicality for caregivers on this segment. This is Peter Rosenberger. This is Hope for the Caregiver. We'll be right back.